Well, it's been years since I posted any videos. I was getting a little irritated with YouTube's censoriousness, the way they like to punish creators. They never punished me. I was never monetized, had to be demonetized or anything. I just made content. But I didn't like what they were doing to other creators, but when I looked at some other video sites like Rumble, they just didn't have, at least at that time, the image quality that I was looking for. If you've watched them other videos, I like close-ups. I like good close-ups, and I like good resolution. So anyway, I was persuaded to make another video. This one about a standard manufacturing 1911A1 color cased version. I am a sucker for real bone charcoal color case, and when these came out, I wanted one. I liked them, even though I'm typically not a fan of anything other than the standard GI type 1911. Upswept beaver tails and skeletonized hammers and other changes and flared ejector ports and things never really appealed to me. I know that a lot of guys that carry them, these are the sorts of things that they demand. So I never was a big fan of those. I never bought any, Les Baer or Dan Wesson or anything like that. If I carried a 1911, which I sometimes do, it was just a plain Jane stainless Colt. But I was so impressed with the machining quality of my standard manufacturing single action. When I found one of these at a good price recently, I picked it up. And naturally, even before I picked it up, I looked online. I've been looking online for information about them, and there's not a whole lot of technical information about it. So I thought, looking it over, thinking about perhaps stripping the clear coat that they put on it. The clear coat's there to protect the very fragile case colors, which tend to fade easily with any kind of rubbing, contact, and sunlight, ultraviolet light. So it's got a good purpose for being there. I may leave it on. I don't know. It's a little too shiny for my taste, but that's my tastes. A lot of people really like the lacquered stuff, and they put it on their single action, and USFA put them on their single actions. Turnbull, almost everybody that specializes in fancy case hardened colors will lacquer them to maintain them. I mean, you're paying for that color, and to have it just fade as quickly as it can sometimes do with exposure to the elements and sunlight and handling, why not? But I think it makes it a little too slick, tends to, a little too glossy. I don't know, we'll see. But given the possibility that I might strip it off, and given the fact that there were not a whole lot of videos that did much more than kind of what I'm doing here at this part of the video, just sort of showing it off and then shooting it at the range, I haven't seen so far any video that strips one of these down and examines some of the parts. And so I thought I would do that on camera, let some people see the quality of their internals and their machining. I did do a little field strip last night and then put it back. So this isn't like a brand new unboxing, never touched. But I haven't shot it yet, and I have barely handled it. I just field stripped it for curiosity's sake last night. So, Standard Manufacturing, subsidiary of Connecticut Shotgun. They make very high-end shotguns. They also make what, the DPS 12 or something, some more tactical stuff. But they really got their start with very, very high-end shotguns. Like $30,000 shotguns, some of them. I mean, they're fine shotguns. I don't own any, but when they turned their hand at making a single action, they just used the name Standard Manufacturing, and they make some other guns under the Standard Manufacturing name. This is an idea of the depth and the brightness and the clarity of their case colors. I don't know how case hardened this actually is. It's kind of a new thing. They weren't the first ones to color case a 1911, but there's some thin walled sections of any kind of 1911 frame, like the part of the dust cover there. It's pretty thin walled with trigger guard, the beaver tail. Generally, when you're case hardening something, they don't really case harden very thin parts because the case hardening goes too deep. It's very hard. It's glass hard, and it can make it brittle. So I think Turnbull was the first ones to really pioneer a way to case color something without getting it so hot that it warped it too much, without getting it so hot that it made it too hard. So I don't know how hard the casing is on the outside of this. The colors are beautiful. A little darker than I typically prefer. Of course, I learned to appreciate case colors with Colt single actions, and so that's the colors I'm used to. Usually a little lighter, more pinks and more grays. As this fades, I presume it will probably get a lot grayer over time. But these sections right here where it's tends to be lighter, those kind of appeal to me more. That area there is particularly attractive to me. So anyway, so examining on the outside, how do they make theirs? Well, obviously they don't copy a GI. Lots of ways to tell. The slide serrations, they're attractive, they're angled, they're not straight up and down like a GI would be. They're also not very sharp. The only criticism that I have on this pistol, from just the first time I picked it up and started messing with it, is that's not a very secure purchase. So with sweaty hands, bloody hands, a lot of oil, it's easy to slip off. It's not much of a purchase. And these Novak sights they put on, very nice sights, but they don't provide any kind of a ledge either. So I don't know how much that'll affect things, but just when I was first handling it, it's not easy to pull that slide back with it slippery like that. Anyway, should have shown the clearing on camera first. That was an empty magazine. That's one of the reasons I'm thinking about removing the clear coat, because I think that adds to the slickness. Like I say, my hands aren't particularly sweaty right now, but just handling it, I've got a little bit of oil on my hands and I'm having a hard time. If I didn't have strong hands, I don't know how I'd be able to do that. I don't know of any other way to to do that quickly, but then grabbing it like that. And let's see here. So that's, you know, that's not really a minor criticism. That's actually pretty. This is, I'm going to find a way to develop a better purchase on that before I would want to carry this. Because it's one thing to say, well, I'm going to carry it chambered, cocked and locked. I won't have to actually grab the slide ever, and I guess you could just rely on the slide stop to drop it, but I typically like to pull it back and let it go. So there's that one criticism. Overall, some people have said, well, they don't undercut their trigger guards, and like, you know, it's not undercut so much as a Les Baer would be, or some of the other people that specialize in the, you know, the really tactical carry pistols. They undercut it a little bit. They do. There, you can tell that there's a contour change in that area from a standard GI model or one of the standard Colt Series 70 or Series 80. You can kind of see a little line running across here. So they change that a little bit, and of course you can see this area here. You can tell it kind of sweeps up a little bit, whereas like on a standard GI, this is a Remington Rand. You can kind of see the difference between the two there. So it's undercut a little bit. The front strap checkering is very nice. Very, very well executed, and gives you a really good purchase. That's why this is kind of surprising to me that they would use something as difficult to grab a hold of with fingers that are all wet with oil or sweat. That's a really, really nice purchase. And the mainspring housing as well, very, very nicely done. Their beaver tail, I mean, it's their own design from what I can tell. This is the first 1911 I've owned for any real length of time that has a beaver tail. I don't usually look for that. And of course, anytime you have a beaver tail, the idea is to ride it up a little bit higher. And the first beaver tails that came out, that was an issue, because the higher you rode it, the less likely you were to fully depress it. And so they put this thing, they call it a memory bump. Everybody calls that a memory bump. It just protrudes out a little bit so it will still reliably depress. Scallops are nicely done. You'll sometimes see on some old GI pistols, you saw it on Kimbers, on a lot of Colts. This area right here, it's funny. One of the things, wasn't a criticism, it was one of the things that I noted about the single action that they made was the section right here in the top part of the inside of the trigger guard was sort of machined out a little bit more than what you would see on a standard single action Army. And on this one, it's machined very, very straight right through here. Whereas like this is a old Remington Rand GI pistol, you can see where it's machined up a little bit there. Don't think it is on this Colt, but this is one of the Colts that was made after they switched to CNC machines, and I think that's something that they eliminated. All right, the grip panels, walnut. What else can I say? They're well executed walnut checkered grips. They do put Novak sights on them. Their small parts are niter blued. Pretty. It won't last with any real handling, but it's very, very pretty. Barrel bushing is just standard, looks like black oxide blue, hot salt bluing, as well as their recoil spring plug, and of course their sights. And it looks like their magazine release also, just standard, I think. Nah, that could be not. I think that's niter blued. Their grip screws, one thing you may notice about them, they, at least right now, might not be if I loosen them, but they're qualified. They both go the same direction. This side too. Hopefully these will maintain that qualification as well. They say on their website that they make all their They make everything. I mean, obviously they don't make the sights. I don't know if they make their own magazine. I mean, their own springs. Don't think they make their own magazines because they're very, I don't know. If I was going to make a magazine, I think I'd put my name on it. And that's a very plain Jane magazine. It's got the bump right there in the follower, which the dimple, which I think is important for that last round. What it does is it retards the last round in the magazine the same way as every other round in the magazine is retarded by their rim catching on the rim area of the round below it. And that's necessary because you want to retard it just enough so that the breech face area doesn't bounce the round out in front and then have the extractor have to catch up to it. If the extractor has to catch up to the round, it'll overextend that extractor around the rim. So the bump is there to retard it enough, because every round above it gets caught a little bit on that rim area on its way in, and that kind of slows it down. Causes controlled feed, so as the breech is pushing it up, the rim slides up under the extractor each time rather than bouncing out in front of it. So yeah, they put the dimple there, but it's also a rounded top and profile, and it's got kind of modified feed lips. A GI wouldn't have this little step in it. So don't know who makes their magazines. Maybe they make theirs, I don't know, but very nondescript. Don't know how they function. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and break this down. Now, there's instructions. They list 2 disassembly instructions for breaking their pistols down. And both of them involve pulling out the slide stop before you loosen the barrel bushing. That's not how I typically take a 1911 down, just because I don't like the whole pistol to still be under spring tension when I'm trying to pull the slide stop out. That's their instructions, so I guess you can ignore the way that I'm getting ready to take this down. They say you can use a bushing wrench, but I found out last night I was able to turn the bushing without a wrench. It's snug, but it's not so tight that you can't do it by hand. I noticed, and I'll point this out now, they use a kind of a stubby spring plug, but it's all machined. I think all of them are for everybody. Anyway, so now the spring tension is off, and I just think this comes out a little easier that way. So let's look at this. Huh. Well, this is interesting. I didn't notice this last night. A lot of guys are afraid to show people their serial numbers, but this has the last 4 of my serial number electro penciled on it, which indicates that it was hand fitted to the pistol. They do mention that if you order small parts, that a lot of times they have to be hand fitted to the pistol. So there's that anyway. They didn't just pull it out of a bin and slap it in the pistol and go. This seems to argue that yes, they at least fit this at the factory, and probably, as they claim, made it at the factory. So, and they say that they're all machined, so I like that it's not MIM, cast in any way, it's machined out of bar stock. Let's pull this barrel bushing off. Good snug fit to the barrel. This area here is in the white, which indicates to me there was some fitting involved. You know, it started off blued and then there was some fitting involved. Same with the inside. So I like that. That bodes well. You can see some of the areas on the inside of this barrel bushing. The blue remains, some of it's in the white, so this is indicative that they have fit this to the barrel. They've snugged it up, and it looks like it's a good fit. All right. Their guide rod is different. It's solid, for one, completely solid. On a GI and on a Colt, it's drilled out all the way through the center. I believe them when they say they made this. They say they make their barrels, so I believe them, because there's no markings other than 45 auto on them. So I have to take their word for it. Good looking stainless steel barrel. They've test fired it, so the bore's not perfect on the inside, but I mean, it's just dirty. It's not perfectly clean on the inside. It's a nice looking bore. This is a fully throated barrel. I've never had a fully throated barrel. This was something that everybody used to consider absolutely necessary if you were going to carry anything but ball ammo in a 1911. Colt accomplished, at least my Colts have been very reliable, with hollow points. Yeah, hard to show this on camera. Maybe I'll take that out later. They don't do the full throating job. Colt doesn't. They just sort of do a little area right here that they kind of dimple in. And that seems to do a good job and leaves more meat on the sides. But they fully throated it, which is something all the custom smiths used to do, and a lot of people, that's what they do now with theirs. It's a fine looking barrel. And again, that's a good fit. I mean, it slides on there easily enough, but I can't really even feel it wiggle. It suggests that it's going to be pretty accurate. And I noticed that the lockup on the barrel to the slide was tighter than on some of my others. There was a little hesitation when I was pulling up on the don't think you can see right now. Little hesitation in unlocking. That'll break in a little bit more, but that suggests to me it locks up tight, and it's going to lock up consistently every time. That's your most important thing, is good, tight, consistent lockup versus slide to frame fit. Although it's got a good slide to frame fit. Other people have said, well, it's not as tight as on my Kimber, it's not as tight as on my Springfield Tactical something or other, and it probably isn't. I can kind of feel a little bit, you can hear that, but you don't really see it much, do you? I think it's got a good fit. It's really silky smooth. The only resistance you're going to get is this is your disconnector, and as it rubs along the bottom of your slide on the inside, it's going to offer resistance. Like this is silky smooth until it hits that disconnector. So they've also electro penciled the bottom of the slide with the last 4 of the serial number. So they don't do that just to say, hey, look. I don't think anyway. Hey, look, this is to trick you into thinking we hand fit that. No, they usually do that so they can keep parts together as they go through the process. By they, I mean manufacturers that typically do that. They're making sure that whatever they fit together gets assembled together later on. So we'll set the slide aside for now and look at the frame. Alright. By the way, that's good, precise clicking into place on this safety. Don't know if I like the large paddle. I've seen other people complain about it. I'm just not used to it. Certainly gives you plenty of purchase. I think, again, if everybody, people will complain about a particular gun manufacturer's gun. Well, I wish it had this, or I wish it had that. And there's so many. Everybody has their own preference. They can't please everybody. They can't get everything about a gun exactly the same way that everybody would like. It's how they like. It's how they do it. Now I'm having a little difficulty finding that half spot to pull this out. So that's how you take a 1911 safety out. You gotta, it's won't come out all the way down, won't come out all the way up. It's got to be in the halfway spot. This is not easy. There we go. All right, let's see here. Well, this is the spring that provides some tension for the slide stop and the safety, and as you can see, there is no kink in it. Everybody else, I think, at least Colt and the GIs, there was a kink in it right in the middle, and that kept it enough friction so it didn't fall out. You saw this one fly out, so I guess that's a criticism. I don't know why they wouldn't put that kink in there, but that's why that flew out of there. There's nothing to retain it. And with the safety out, we'll look at that later. Safety out, let's look at it. Also, electro pencil with the last 4 of the serial number. That's some clean machining. I like that. I like that machining on that safety. I mean, there's a lot of people that use just cast parts. I like having fully machined parts. That argues just for some of the price tag of them. I mean, you can get these really cheap T-sauce, and the people say they're really good, and Rock Island and all that say they're really, really great. But to make that price point, they have to use a lot of cast and MIM parts. Okay, this is their grip safety. Again, electro pencil with the last 4. The area inside here is not lacquered, and also not as vibrant. May give a hint as to what the rest of the gun may look like if I strip the lacquering off. Might not be happy with that. But yeah, that's a fine looking beaver tail grip safety. Clean, again, clean machining. Yeah, I'm used to just taking apart a lot of 1911s that just have cast parts like this in it, and having it all machined is nice. Alrighty. Well, on my Colts, a lot of times, once I get that off and I lower my hammer, I go ahead and, because it's already relieved a lot of the pressure on it, I go ahead and pull out my hammer pin. But the strut's still under some tension, and if you ever watch my video on disassembling a GI 1911 without tools, that's one thing that I use. So I use the hammer strut as a tool to then punch this out. But this is niter blued as well, and that would probably scratch it up. So yeah, we'll take the grips off and risk misaligning those qualified screw heads. Hopefully it didn't pull the bushing out with it, which sometimes happens on a 1911 because these grip screws screw into bushings that are screwed into pretty thin walled steel. So they're staked in place in the back typically. And again, though, pleased that the bushings didn't loosen, so they've been properly staked into place. All right, supported about as well as it ought to be, I think. All right, plunger came out easily enough. See that the plunger pin is niter blued. I'd say that'll be gone in fairly short order, the bluing. All right. Mainspring housing, again, electro penciled with the last 4 serial number. I rarely ever take these apart, and I won't take this apart. Yeah, very attractive. I like the machining on that. Very clean machining. All right, and now we'll be able to easily... Now this is interesting. Well, it's slightly headed. Okay, yeah, very slightly headed. So this is an interesting departure. I've not seen this in any, I haven't stripped some of the fancier guns, so I don't know. Maybe it's like everybody else. I don't know if you can see this, but this is supposed to be a headed pin, and the head is usually a bit more pronounced on something like a Colt or on a GI model. And that's what keeps it from falling all the way through the frame. That's a very, very slightly headed pin. And correspondingly, it looks like slightly deeper bevels on the edges of the hole. So anyway, the idea is you got a headed pin, and it's retained in the frame, by the safety, the back of the safety. It fits very deep, which, you know, keep it from rubbing on the safety. That's interesting. I almost didn't detect a head at all on that pin. That was interesting. Zoom back out a little bit. So yeah, the hammer strut pin, or hammer pin. All right, here's the hammer and strut, and again, their own design. On the original GI, this was a machined part, and this also is a machined part. You can tell, but it was machined square, and then it was machined round. They've not bothered to do that, which is fine. It works. All it has to do is fit down into the hole, and it fits into the hole just fine. It's a perfectly big hole. It just has to be round there, and it has to be curved, and it is. But this is what I would use to take that pin out on a GI, and this might actually mar it up since it's not a round pin. So their hammer. I don't know what to say. It's a machined hammer. That's nice to see. It's not a cast hammer. So again, it seems to validate what they've said, that they make all their internal parts and they machine them all. This is machined. I don't know what to say about the design. It looks fine. I don't think I have an opinion on the best looking skeletonized hammer. I don't typically have them on my 1911s. I will say this is an interesting departure here, and that's this is your safety notch, or your core quarter cock notch, or some people call it a half cock notch. Now this is your fully cocked notch here. This is where your sear engages. With very narrow hooks. Argues for a good trigger pull. But usually your quarter cock or your half cock notch also goes across the whole width of the hammer. So that's interesting. I'll probably have to, once I get this apart, I'll pull a GI apart and we'll look at the parts, compare the parts. All right. Good looking flat spring there. And again, very, very slightly headed pin. Well, that actually seems to stick out more than the other. And the sear and the disconnector. It's a standard looking sear. I've seen Colts that were MIM. I can see where this has been fitted. You can see the polishing on it. Good looking sear. And disconnector. Ooh. Yeah, it's a good looking disconnector. And you can see where they've polished it so it rides up through the hole, the tunnel there in the frame. So yeah, on my video where I took it apart without tools, I used this leg, sometimes this leg of the spring to get that out, but I'm going to use an actual screwdriver. And there's your magazine catch. Again, fully machined. Very well done. I like having all the small parts like this machined out of bar stock. I really do. It's just my preference. Here's our trigger. Also, electro penciled with the last 4 of the serial number. It's got an over travel screw. I hadn't noticed that before. Interesting that the face of it, where your trigger finger rides, is not at all slicked up or polished. It's also not grooved. It's almost like it's left as roughly machined. Interesting. Doesn't bother me. A lot of people put, machine grooves in there as an extra purchase. Some people don't like the grooves in there. Some people like them to be smooth. They just say, well, what the hell, we'll just leave it as machined, and it'll give you some textured feel there. But a lot of people use aluminum for the trigger face here. This is not. The trigger pad is steel. A lot of them would use aluminum because it's light. The idea being that if you have really, really light trigger pull and you were to drop your slide that might jar everything enough, this would have enough of its own momentum that as the slide slams home and sort of throws the whole pistol forward, that this would have enough momentum to remain in place and tap the sear and drop the hammer. So you have to be careful making your triggers too light on a 1911. That's one of the reasons why. And this would not be conducive to a very, very light trigger because of the weight. But that's a fine looking trigger. You can see you can see the colors where it goes from the niter blue and then straw and then in the white, because they obviously dipped that into the hot niter salts to blue it. Again, that bluing won't last. It sure is pretty, but it won't last. It can't. The nature of it. All right. Well, this is as far as I take these apart. I'm just looking at the machining right now. This is well machined. I don't know why there's a bevel right here. nothing wrong with it. I just don't know why it's there. Sometimes what people would look for in what they would consider to be a properly made 1911 frame is something that they refer to as the bow tie, meaning that this section right here is where the barrel lugs, the barrel feet area there, smack up against the frame when it is all the way back, and that it would be easier to, it's better on the pistol if that does so against a surface that's not machined flat all the way through here, because there could be irregularities and cause some. So when they drill this hole, they drill it a little bit deeper so that it only mates at the very, very top of that, and they like it to do that. But what that usually leaves is an area they call the bow tie. They usually have a little area here. They beveled this off here so it doesn't look like a bow tie, but interesting departure. They took the time to do it, so they did it for a reason. Just don't know why. Very clean machining. You can scarcely see the machining marks. And when you do, they're little tiny swirls. And they, Colt now, unless they're making a retro model, Colt, rather than machine a hole right here, a little horseshoe-shaped hole, they just cut it all the way down, straight. Traditionalists like that little bit of rail left on top. I do too, although arguably less chance of cracking the frame with this section milled out. They started milling it out with the 10 millimeters, their Delta Elites, because the frame flexed enough that it would, because of the heavy recoil, that it would crack. And so they decided, since they were cracking and everybody was saying, oh my gosh, my pistol's cracking, it was self-limiting. Once it cracked there, it relieved the stress and there was no longer any worries. But people said, my gun's broken, it's cracked. So Colts got tired of the people sending their pistols back for warranty repair. Said, you know what, we're just going to make them all machined right through there so they won't crack there anymore. Nobody will be worried. I like seeing that. Like, it's more traditional. So again, we'll look this all over the frame. I think now that I have it apart, particularly now that I had so much trouble retracting the slide, I'm going to put acetone on this frame and slide and take the lacquer off and just let it age gracefully. It won't look as pretty. So this is the prettiest it's going to look. But I want to be able to use it and not just be a safe queen. It's pretty colors. And the shape of that ejector is, I think, different than, they vary widely among manufacturers. And so we'll compare that to GI. Pretty much now it's obvious to me I'm going to have to strip a GI model down and just compare. And it's just a compare and contrast. It won't be a which is better. They're just different. All right, we'll set this frame aside and look at the slide. And we need to remove the firing pin and extractor. And this is a Series 70, so there's no firing pin safety on it. That's a standard looking firing pin. They say they make their small parts, so they probably make it. Now Colt's using a titanium firing pin in their Series 70s just to try to reduce the inertia because they were afraid of failing drop tests. And the idea being that if you dropped a 1911 hard enough and it landed on its muzzle, that the weight of the firing pin alone would, under its own inertia, fly forward enough to set a cartridge off. And lot of states had drop tests, and that's how Colt. The first way that Colt passed the drop test was they came up with a firing pin safety. It wouldn't allow the firing pin to go forward unless the trigger was pulled. Then they started using titanium firing pins on their Series 70s, and I think they use titanium firing pins on all of them now, just because. Standard doesn't, but in Standard's manual, they also say it can discharge if dropped on the muzzle. They actually mention that. There's something to be careful about. And this is their firing pin. Retention plate. Need to bone up on my nomenclature. I forget what everybody else calls these, but now there's one by EGW that I like, that I like putting in my Colts. Reduces this radius, because originally they weren't as radiused as this. They were much sharper on the very first ones, and the first complaint from soldiers was they made the pistol hard to rack with the hammer down, so they put a radius on there so it'd be easier. Of course, the idea of it not being as radiused was that the first little bit of travel, the first resistance that the slide got was just this bottom portion trying to overcome the hammer. And the less radiused it was, the lower on the hammer that it made contact, and therefore the less mechanical advantage it had, and therefore the harder it was to come back. And you wanted that delay, you wanted that stiffness at first during the firing cycle. So that was the way Browning originally designed it, but they eventually put a radius on there. So standard firing pin spring, except let's see here. On a GI and a Colt, the spring is one-sided. It's meant to grip the spring, grip the firing pin on one end and slide easily on and off on the other. This is not. It's just the same on both ends. Make of that what you will. The extractor okay, that's not hard to take out. Good. Huh. Yeah, I believe it when they say they make their own extractors, because that is different. And I kind of like it, but it's different. I'm not used to the extractors being, and I don't know what kind of spring steel they use. Oh look, it's got the last 3 of the serial number etched on it. So this was tuned to this pistol. But all the extractors, and I'll show you when we do the compare, they all have this built up area here, but they're usually not round in profile on these areas. So that's interesting. This is just one big spring. Interesting. Okay. And we'll do a little once over on the slide. Look at the machining on it. It's well machined. I mean, I think this is it's a quality built 1911. Do I anticipate it as being the very best shooting 1911 you can buy? No, I doubt it. It's not what I've read. I haven't shot this yet. I'm used to a much lower standard of accuracy than I think this will turn in. I'd say this will probably turn in a much better standard of accuracy than any of the GI styles that I have. Boy, that's some lovely case colors. I'm still waffling on whether to take that off, but as hard as it is right now to grasp that, I think taking the clear coat off will make it a little better. That's really the only criticism I have. The slide serrations. Makes me wonder if they use a laser to engrave their markings. Handsome looking markings. Almost wonder if you couldn't take this to a trophy shop, somebody that does laser engravings, and say, hey, I want you to laser engrave along these lines, the very tops of them right there. Deep laser engraving, and maybe that'll rough it up enough to where you can grip a hold of it. Don't know why they would design it like that. Too slick. But it's a fine looking slide. I know there was one time Colt had an issue and everybody was complaining. The spring tunnel here, that one side would be thinner than the other. It was obvious, and it was lopsided. People did not like the way that looked. Probably wasn't good for the pistol either. It was well executed. All right, good looking slide. Good looking pistol overall. Let's see. Do I want to do? You almost hate to compare it to what I would say is a modern Colt, because I can't tell you that Colt makes their pistols like this today. Because I bought this in 2005, and it wasn't long after they switched over to their CNC machining. But and then I did some work on it. Every edge was sharp. I had to go in here and blend in these edges. It was too sharp, so it became a good carry piece. But you hate to say, okay, I'm going to compare this to the way Colt does it, and then you have to wonder, well, how well did Remington Rand follow the blueprints? But wipe some of the sweat off my hands. We're going to do a GI. This is one of the CMP 1911s. And I was stoked because it was Remington Rand, and my very first 1911 ever was a Remington Rand. So that was kind of neat. This comes apart much more easily because it's just looser tolerances overall. I guess, yeah, using this is, I guess, kind of a good idea. It says, all right, this is what was still considered acceptable in the U.S. military to be issued out to people. Hammer's got to be cocked first, dummy. All right, and this will probably come out easily enough, and probably. Nope. Pardon the speed, I'm just trying to get this together fast. I'll probably fast forward to this. Where's that little screwdriver? Oh, it didn't leave it. Okay. We won't worry about taking the grips off. Okay. You know, it's this little tensioner didn't come out, because I guarantee you well, we'll show you. I'll actually show you, yeah. So yeah, GI plunger, the spring's got a kink right in the center of it, and that's what gives it enough friction to hold it in place. People see that and go, oh, my spring's bent. It's supposed to be kinked, and this is not as heavily kinked as a lot of modern Colts are these days. Whereas the standard, no real kink that I can see. We're looking for like major differences. Okay, so here's interesting. Here's a grip safety. This is a standard GI grip safety. Of course, they were originally all machined. Here's the beaver tail grip safety. And this is just kind of interesting, I noticed, was that this little leg here, and this is what pivots up out of the way. This little protrusion pivots up out of the way of the trigger bar. So once it pivots up out of the way, it lets the trigger go all the way to the rear and set off and trip the sear. So that's always been there. I've never seen one machined out here, which is just interesting is all. It's not necessary, so it's just different. I don't know why they do it, but there it is. Just different. Doesn't need to be not milled out. So yeah, interesting departure. I mentioned the sear. No, the hammer. Okay, so this is a GI hammer, and this is a hammer from Standard Manufacturing. I mentioned the strut. You know, it was flat and then rounded off at the ends, and this is just flat all the way down. There's a difference there, but yeah, there's the full cock notch. There it is on here. It looks like there's a difference, but really just because this has more meat along the bottom of it than this does. Still the same angle from the center pin, but yeah, that little quarter notch or half cock notch, the safety notch on the GI, is, and it goes across the whole width of the hammer, and Standards does not. Don't know why. Just interesting that it doesn't. I think I figured it out, and that is actually kind of an engineering feat. I think it's actually kind of clever. Maybe other people do it too. I don't know. Okay. Here's your sear on a standard GI, and you know it fits like this. And if it ever falls to that point, or you engage it in this point, you're subjecting their sear to different type of wear in the half cock notch than it gets in the full cock notch. So if you have this surface mated exactly as you want to the bottom of your hammer hooks, and then it spends much time in the half cock notch or banging against that for any reason, it's going to change that surface. Now on the full cock notch, it's only on the edges because the center is machined out, has to be. So it looks to me like Standard said, hey, since it really only contacts, where is it? Since it only contacts the hammer hooks on the edges, let's make it only contact the half cock notch in the center. So any wear that might occur from any engagement with the half cock notch doesn't affect the critical surfaces here on the sides. So clever. I think that's what they've done there. Pretty cool. I mean, all the other parts, they're so vastly different because, you know, there's the mainspring housing of a USGI. I mean, it's curved and everything else. It's so vastly different. Oh, remember I said the spring plug on the Standard was stubby? Yeah, look at that. Yeah, look at that. Pretty stubby. And what they also don't do, again, departure. Pro or con, can't tell you. But the original GIs, the end of your spring was meant to be able to be caught by this little indention. So the spring, as you twist it to the left, it was just to hold it captive when you took it apart. Doesn't affect it in shooting. This is not very deeply done anyway. It comes out easily. Modern Colt's going to be a little deeper. This doesn't have that. Again, doesn't affect it in shooting. I don't know how being stubby affects it, if anything. It's just interesting that they made it stubby like that. Also, I mentioned the spring guide. Like I said, original GI. It's hollow, drilled out, and the back of this is completely squared. And standard manufacturing, same length, much heavier because it's not hollowed out, it's not drilled out, and they have put a bevel, which would engage I guess it's just a clearance bevel. Just a clearance bevel there for the bottom of the barrel. And I've seen other ones look like that from other makers. This doesn't have that. It's made differently anyway. Alright, let's this extractor fits more tightly in its tunnel, and a lot of them do. I noticed that standard did not. It came out very easily. It was interesting. Okay, so firing pin. This is interesting in that this firing pin looks like an older Colt Series 80 firing pin. Now, having this cut right here does reduce the weight overall, and it's also the shoulder, the shank there is shorter. So I would say, okay, overall you've made a slightly lighter firing pin than a standard GI firing pin, so a little less momentum that way. But it's got that little cutout there. It suggests to me that they didn't make their own, because if all you're making is a Series 70, why would you have this milled out portion here? Because in a Series 80, that's where your firing pin safety plunger rides. So I don't know if they make their own firing pins. I don't know. Or maybe they do, and that's the design they chose because it removes a little bit of weight. I don't know. But you notice that spring slides easy both ways. And on a GI, it's supposed to snug up there at the end. And oftentimes it won't on this side, see? Falls off easily that way. And this way it's supposed to kind of tighten, snug up on there, so it's held captive. But this is the neat thing. Okay, you can look at a standard GI extractor, and this one's bowed. I mean, that's how they've tuned it. They've tuned it pretty stiffly. But how it's flat on the sides, it's got this beefed up portion in the center. Let's see if I can keep this centered in the frame. Still show it close up. So that's what a GI extractor looked like. And then the standard manufacturing, obviously that's their, I'm guessing, I haven't looked at anybody else's modern, but that's their own design. You know, it's round and cross section. It may make it more, I don't know what kind of spring steel they use. May make it more springy, more resilient, able to be flexed more times and come back to and not take a set. I don't know. It's just obviously different. Obviously different. They don't put any kind of it's also a wider, has more engagement area on the hook, which is also interesting. And there's no entry bevel like on a GI. There's an entry bevel because it has to be pretty stiff, and it's for the rounds riding up into the slide. It's supposed to hit that bevel and ease it up in there. Standard doesn't have it. Don't know how they, it's smooth there, it's not sharp, but just, it's interesting, it's different. And considering how well they've thought out some of their other parts, they obviously decided this is the way they wanted to make an extractor. But they have put more, they have made a wider head. And I presume wouldn't make sense. I was going to say, and I presume maybe the whole daggum tunnel's wider, but no, it isn't. The GI one just narrows. This one doesn't. If you're getting these in real time, it's not like I'm attempting to school somebody. Hey, here's what I've learned about it. I'm learning as we go along. And standard disconnector. Disconnectors are... I'm not seeing any other kind of disconnector design. And standard didn't deviate from this either, as far as I could tell. If you find it among the parts, I'd show you. Yeah, there you go. Essentially the same, but I mean they've made their own. I mean there's some slight differences in contours and in thicknesses of certain parts. This is their own machining design. So that's really the only things I would note. Of course, the overall fitting, you know, GI, barrel bushing, its overall fit, finish. If I take the slide of this Remington Rand and put them together, let's see. These are the ones that we had when I was at a tank company. Very, very, very rattly. Although I'd say this will rattle a little bit. Let's see. Without the disconnector in there, it's, well, it certainly doesn't, not nearly as much. That's a nice smooth slide travel. Well, all right, I'm gonna reassemble Remington Rand here and strip that lacquer off. Yep, I'm gonna strip that lacquer off and then reassemble standard manufacturing. All right, progress report. This is the slide now stripped of all the clear coat. I'm going to end up putting some Johnson's paste wax on it afterward anyway, so I'm going to try to protect it with wax and or oil rather than a clear coat. But yeah, it's very different. Here's the frame. Frame still has a clear coat on it. You can see it's still much more vibrant, has much more, you know, it's more attractive this way than just raw, bare color case hardening. But I like this more. Now this is very grippy for me now, but my hands are completely degreased from the acetone. I don't know that I've really improved the grip there at all. But well, okay. Here it is, stripped of clear coat. Not nearly as attractive, but we're going to go ahead and put our own protection on this in the form of some paste wax. All right, well, here it is. A couple coats of Johnson's paste wax on it, which really causes it to take on almost the same look as before. I like the wax better as a preservative instead of the clear coat. So we'll get this reassembled. Well, here it is back together again. It looks pretty nice. It's not as shiny as it was before. It's more of a matte look now with the paste wax on it, which I actually do prefer. It almost looks, when they have the clear coat on it, like they've over buffed it, and they really haven't, because you can see the lines are very crisp. They wouldn't be if they had overbuffed it, but the clear coat, you know, obviously adds some dimension to that, and it gives the impression of overbuffing, but it's really not. It's a very appropriate level of finish overall. It seems like it's a little easier to grasp now. That clear coat was so slick. My hands aren't completely dry, but I can grab a hold of it better now. I still would prefer a more aggressive slide serrations, but it's got a pretty nice trigger pull. It's not a like what I would call a match, super light match trigger pull. But again, I'm not sure that would be appropriate for this, frankly, given the weight, physical weight of the trigger bar itself, and the type of firing pin. Although it's a very, very light. That's got to be the lightest hammer spring I've ever felt, and this is a light in construction hammer. They can get away with that, having a light mainspring, because if your hammer doesn't weigh a whole lot, it's going to fly faster, and you get the same sort of kinetic energy transfer. So overall, I'm pleased with the appearance and the build quality of this. I think it's a very good pistol for its money. Proof's in the pudding. Don't know how it's going to shoot, but everything that I've read by people who own them said they do shoot very well. So I'll hate to promise a video. I haven't made one in years, like I said, but I need to get this to the range and give you all a range report. All right, have a good day.